Hello, welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. My guest tonight is Sean Grimes, who is a medical doctor, and in this episode he talks about his training and how he worked in a cinema. If you like these videos, please subscribe, click on the bell for notifications, and thank you for watching. This is Let's Talk, and my guest today is Sean Grimes, who is a medical doctor. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, George.
These interviews are all about just getting to know people and about the backgrounds they've had. And one of my interests with yourself, I suppose, is that you're a medical doctor. Tell us a little bit about how did your journey into becoming a medical doctor start?
Convoluted.
Initially,
the goal was not necessarily to be a medical doctor. I had an interest in science, and science seemed to be where I was going to go. Chose a science degree, completed that, worked as a scientist, worked in various branches of science, not merely research, but in diagnostic science and things like that. And then returned to study medicine, as it was deemed by me at that time to be an alternative to doing a PhD. With the view to never actually working with patients, but working in a research environment or histopathology, which is looking down microscopes. And I ended up loving patient contact, and then ended up eventually a GP and worked in palliative medicine, obstetric medicine, and here I am.
Yeah. So what sort of age were you when you started to study to be a doctor?
I entered medical school at 30.
At 30.
And just went through that. Some 12 years older than the vast majority of my, the class cohort, except for one young man who was a little bit older than I am, and he was the grandfather of the class, not me. And he actually had a PhD, so he was doctor now. But being older going in, I found was a benefit, a plus, not a negative. I did find, compared to my first degree, where my mind didn't absorb knowledge the way it previously did. I had to focus harder, I had to work harder, I had to study harder. But the result of that was that I enjoyed doing what I was doing, and found that just worked for me. Medicine is something, as a subject to study, I found I could do.
So because you were older, did you find that you were more focused on what you were trying to specifically do?
Not necessarily. When I started to study medicine, it was with a view to being a laboratory doctor, not a patient doctor who saw patients. So my focus was very different at that time. And the nature of medical school is the pass mark for medical examinations is 50. So you have to achieve 50 as a minimum. And they're quite tough. And it just meant I had to work hard. I don't know that I was more focused. I was very lucky. I worked through my medical degree. I started working in a cinema in Queen's Film Theatre in Belfast when I was 19 years of age, and I worked there all the way through until halfway through my final year in medicine. And I worked sometimes 60-hour weeks in the cinema and studying at the same time, missing a few classes along the way occasionally. But that meant that finding the time to study was really easy, because I worked as a projectionist in the cinema. So I had the benefit of an isolated box at the back of the cinema where people weren't allowed to come around, so I was essentially isolated. And I could work there. I got paid to watch movies, which was my passion at the time. I had time to study. And it just, everything fitted, and it also funded my way through medical school. So it was a second degree. I wasn't getting funding for that, and it just meant everything fell into place. I don't think it was designed, it just happened, but it worked out.
Obviously, being a filmmaker myself, the cinema was a big impact on me sort of growing up as well, and it kind of influenced me quite a bit. So how did the films influence you that you were watching? Do you have any favourites, or what kind of...
Oh, I have favourites, okay. I've seen through my job and through the interest, I actually started working in a cinema because I was interested in cinema. Started as an usher, became a cashier, and then when the opportunity arose to become a projectionist, I grabbed it with both hands and just said, that's it, I'm going to do that. And I worked as a projectionist all the way through, working as a scientist. It's been a big part of that early part of my life was cinema. I actually got paid to watch movies, which such a great job. First, as I say, as an usher, and then as a projectionist. I worked in the Queen's Film Theatre, which has at that time had a particular brief, which now seems to have been taken over by Channel 4 and other Netflix and things like that, which will allow people to see the non-mainstream movies. In those days, this is the mid-80s, sort of to the mid to late 90s, the only place you could regularly see the new movies from foreign cinemas and foreign producers, directors, was the Queen's Film Theatre. So I got to see these when there was no other opportunity to see them, and they were brilliant. The directors would come to the cinema sometimes, and they would give a little discussion beforehand, introduction, and then discussion afterwards, and that was brilliant. And because I was a projectionist, I had to be there to make sure that they give me the cue that they wanted. So I got to speak to the directors, not about their movies, but about what they wanted me to do, which was good. Handled some amazingly rare footage. There was one Charlie Chaplin movie which I actually had to handle. It was made out of nitrate.
Yeah.
And it was the only copy in existence. They hadn't copied it at that stage. They hadn't got a copy of it. And I was handling it. And it's notorious for breaking. And if it had have broke longitudinally, not that way, it could have ran all the way through the projector successfully, all the way onto the reel successfully, but be completely ruined. And you'd never know it.
And it's an explosive material as well, isn't it? The nitroglycerin or something.
They used to light it, and it was a party trick at Hollywood movies. They would take a reel and set fire to the reel and throw it into the swimming pool, and it would burn underwater. It could take the oxygen it needed to burn from the water.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that water wouldn't put it out. If you ever notice an old projection in old cinemas, the projection room has got metal or steel plates over the windows. That was in case it went up.
Right.
We had a lever we could pull to just seal the projection room. I don't know how true this is, but the older projectionists who trained us told us that we were expendable if necessary. They would lock us in. I don't know that that's true. Even the doors, doors were metal. It was a bit like working in a vault.
But you had enough evidence with the way the doors were to kind of maybe it could be true.
Yeah, we had little bits of it when we were doing our training as projectionists. They did light a little bit of nitrate film, and it just burned. The other thing, when I started, we actually had got the old arc projectors, which used 2 carbon rods, and got a little bit of a narc going between the two, and they were on a little worm. We called it a worm, which was like a screw which moved and they were supposed to keep the two the same distance apart.
Right.
And it was actually like a plasma, genuine little bit of plasma between them, and that generated light. It had got a brown tinge to it, so as soon as you fired it up, you could tell which projector you were using from the nature of the light on the screen. And we were trained in that. That was the initial one I was taught. We used that for a while, and then we moved completely to halogen bulbs.
And would that have, you're saying there's a kind of brown tinge, if it was a black and white movie, would it give that sepia tone look? So it wasn't that the film was actually old, it was just the arc light.
I can't say that for sure when it's done on television.
Yeah, well, television would be maybe slightly different, but I know that, I mean, everybody likes sepia tone in black and white photography. But again, if we're using lights today, and one of the lights has tungsten LEDs, and it also has daylight LEDs. And I've added in a little bit of the tungsten light just to give a little bit of warmth, because the room would be very blue if it was just the daylight kind of corrected. So, but I can imagine that in the texture of the light, or the colour temperature would be quite interesting.
Absolutely, and you could tell how close or how far away the rods were by the tone of the light on the screen.
Oh,
you
wow.
could use that. It just took a little bit of learning, but when you learned it, you knew it. But that's completely, those old machines now have been done away with. They don't use them at all anymore.
So what you would have seen nitrate, then it would have gone to acetate film. And how did procedures change with the acetate film?
That would all have been long before I started. As I say, I did handle a few reels of acetate, of nitrate, but that was very occasional.
Yeah.
The majority was ordinary 35mm film, sometimes 8mm. We had an industrial 8mm projector as well.
Oh wow, okay.
So, and video. So I had the opportunity of, and bear in mind this is sort of mid-80s to early 90s. I had the carbon rod, carbon arc, ordinary halogen bulb video, both Betamax and VHS,
Right.
8mm or 35mm. I had experience of working with all of those, and you had to, at any time, you had to be able to use those, whichever they just wanted showing that day, you had to be able to use, which was...
And the sad thing now, it's gone digital. It's basically the files downloaded onto a hard drive and projected that way. It's all changed. Yeah. What about the storytelling part of the films? Did that play? If you're watching a movie, I don't know, 10 times or more, I'm sure you got to see a different view of that movie than someone that just saw it once.
I think that was often the case. There was one of my colleagues. He was a trained projectionist, but he didn't work as a projectionist. He worked as an usher, and he saw the film Cal 27 times. Okay. I've seen Da 11 or 12 times. The thing is, if you enjoy a movie and you get to see it once and twice and 3 times, that can enhance your enjoyment of it. If you don't like a movie, it can actually magnify your dislike of it. And It's a Wonderful Life. Many people love It's a Wonderful Life. I don't. I don't like it in the first instance. I don't buy the sentiments that are in it. But we had a copy of it in the cinema, and there's a little coating on the acetate.
Yeah.
And if it's not chemically just as solid as it should be, each time it goes through the projector, it loses a little bit. And it's like dandruff. And it builds up with each passing through. And you had to clean it as it went through, because the projectors are, in some ways, they're fine pieces of equipment. The tolerances are pretty low. You have to get everything pretty good. And this would shed this messy sort of dandruff through the projector, which can come down through the gate.
Yeah.
And you have to stop the film, you have to clean the gate, you have to restart the film, and nobody likes that. It interrupts the whole flow of the movie. And this happened, despite my best efforts, this happened most times I showed it. So not only did I not like the movie, I had to watch the movie like a hawk, because I had to make sure this didn't happen, and it just made the whole experience awful. Oh. So there are movies I've seen and loved, there are movies I've seen and was very glad to see the back of. And It's a Wonderful Life is one of those. When it comes on television at Christmas, I don't want to see it.
We have more on the way, so please subscribe to this channel and check out the link below if you'd consider becoming a patron to help us keep making more content. Thanks for watching.